time to tantalize your earbuds with creative makers and shakers. It's Creative Living, the podcast with Jane Klaus.
Welcome to Creative Living, where we help you live your most creative life. I'm Jane Klaus. Today's show is going to dive deep into the transformative power of creativity. Creativity isn't just about self-expression. It can be a fulfilling hobby, a side hustle, and also a way to give back and help others. And that reminds me, years ago, I hosted a television series called We Make for Good. It was with the Fairfield Processing Company. I traveled the country meeting incredible people and organizations who dedicated their time and talent to make quilts and pillows and stuffed animals and blankets and other items for those in need. And those people in need included veterans and cancer patients and foster children and domestic violence victims. It was really powerful for me. I mean, just witnessing firsthand how creativity and generosity can change lives was truly inspiring. So my guests today are continuing that mission, changing lives through a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping injured veterans and active duty military through craft therapy. Joining us from Help Heal Veterans are retired U.S. Navy Captain and the CEO of Help Heal Veterans, Joe McClain, and Dr. Keith Stuessi, a career naval physician and expert in traumatic brain injury, who also works for the Traumatic Brain Injury Center for Excellence. Captain McClain and Dr. Stuessi, thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Jane. How are you?
Hi, Jane.
I'm so happy you're here. First of all, thank you so much for your service. You were both in the Navy. You're both captains in the Navy.
That's correct.
Seriously, you've done so much to help our country, and all I do is a podcast. So thank you very, very much. Let's start here, Captain Joe. You were in the Navy almost 30 years, and that included numerous overseas deployments and many leadership roles in and out of the military. You now serve as the CEO of Help Heal Veterans, and that is the organization we're talking about today. Why is it important to you to continue to give back to your country?
You know, I think it's, part of being in the service is being part of something bigger than yourself. And a lot of folks do that with our country. Be you're a police officer, a teacher, serving your local community, and being part of the military makes you part of a certain tribe. And you can never really live it. I mean, when I left the Navy, I went to work for corporate America for a little bit, working for the beer industry, which is awesome. But, there's something about being part of something bigger than yourself and trying to make a difference and serving those who've given so much for our country. So that call to serve came me back to serving for Help Heal Veterans, which is a great organization. We've been around for 53 years. We got our start during the Vietnam War, and our mission is basically creativity to heal the invisible wounds of war.
Amazing. And when we talk about the invisible wounds of war, we think about PTSD, and that could really be a 24/7 ordeal for veterans and their families and active military members as well. So when we talk about that PTSD and those lingering effects, Dr. Stuessi, two of my favorite subjects, just so you know, is creativity, crafting, and health. So thank you. I'm going to read this, and I stole it from something you probably wrote, but the Department of Defense, and you can explain it, the Traumatic Brain Injury Center of Excellence reports that more than 458,000 service members have sustained a traumatic brain injury worldwide since the year 2000. More than 82% have been classified with a mild traumatic brain injury, or TBI, for those people that don't know. Sudden movement can cause the brain to bounce or twist in the skull and cause a chemical change in the brain, disrupting the brain's normal function. So, Dr. Stuessi, talk about what's happening in the brain when somebody has an injury or a related stress. We think PTSD, concussions, depression, it can cause those lasting effects. But give us a basic idea of what's happening in the brain, and then I'll get more specific with you.
Yeah, so thanks for having me, Jane. Those numbers are pretty incredible. We have a division within the TBI Center of Excellence that tracks those numbers. And it's pretty amazing when you look at it, the number that have been affected on active duty. And those, by the way, are just first-time members. So, those don't even include individuals or service members who've had second, third, fourth time concussions or traumatic brain injury. And the majority, like you said, are mild traumatic brain injury. But I caution the audience when they hear that term mild traumatic brain injury, in some ways it's almost a misnomer for individuals, because while the majority, it's true, are going to recover within a couple of weeks, typically 2 weeks up to a month, there are some folks who have lingering effects of it. And not only that, you mentioned the PTSD portion of it. For me, having served 23 years in the military, a very unique population, because not only do you sustain the TBI or the traumatic brain injury, but there's also the mental health aspect of it, unlike many times in the civilian world. So, you could imagine I deployed back in 2010 and 11, and an IED goes off. And so not only does the blast wave affect the brain that I'll talk about in a second, but then their battle buddy dies or loses a limb or something catastrophic happens. So those effects affect the brain also in a negative way that can result potentially with post-traumatic stress or depression or anxiety. So we always have to think about that. And oftentimes the two of those are related. But I won't get too technical with you as far as what happens, but there are chemical changes that are related inside the brain after a traumatic brain injury. And there are chemical shifts inside the brain on a very minute, on what we call an axonal level. There are things that are shifting around. The good news is, as I mentioned earlier, is that those shifts occur, but ultimately things come back to status quo. Unfortunately, if those shifts occur and it's more significant, then you can have really long-term effects. But like I said, most of the time those things go back to normal. Where we really start to worry is when people have had 1, 2, 3, 4, and then those effects become cumulative on the brain. And so the unfortunate thing is with the mild, in the year 2024, as much as scientists have tried and researchers have looked at it, we don't have a single test that can take a look inside the brain and say, you've had this mild traumatic brain injury, definitively say that you've had it. So we as clinicians have to go by the individual story. We look at symptoms that are associated with it. And in most cases, we can compare it to a baseline and say, okay, you were this way before. Now you've had this mechanism of injury. You've had either what we call an alteration of consciousness or a loss of consciousness or some type of amnestic effect. And because of that, now you're having symptoms such as headaches or dizziness or visual issues or nausea, whatnot. And so you put those two together and then you labeled, okay, now you've had this mild traumatic brain injury. So we're working very hard to determine and to look at, diagnoses as far as MRIs and other type of very unique types of scans of the brain. But as far as the mild categories go, we just haven't gotten there right now. And when you talk about the more moderate and severe, of course, many times those individuals have had more significant brain injuries, and you can see those on like a CAT scan or whatnot. So it's still a little bit of a conundrum, but there are changes that we know are happening. It's just trying to image them and really pinpoint what exactly is going on. It's still very, very difficult.
And I would imagine too, if it's, you had this injury or this accident and you think I'm okay, or you can't pinpoint what this mild TBI is, maybe perhaps that veteran that's come home doesn't even know that they're suffering from a mild traumatic brain injury. And then it kind of works its way out in other ways in their life. Do you see that?
Oh, absolutely. And then there's, we talk about the invisible wounds, as you mentioned earlier. And to be quite frank, there, at least when I was serving at the height of the war in 2010 and 11, you can't, again, getting back to the fact you can't see it. So the battle buddy with them has an amputated leg. That's something you can see. Everyone knows that they got injured. If I'm the service member that had the TBI, you can't see anything wrong with me. And quite frankly, we went through a period where the service members were almost ashamed to come to medical. And they were like, well, they may think I'm faking it. I'm having issues with concentration and memory and headaches and everything. And they'll think worse of me if I present to medical. Well, they don't get the treatment. And then of course, down the road, a year, 2 years, or 3 years, it's oftentimes the spouse or the relative that sees that they're just not right. And then, or the command may see that they're just not right. They're not performing as well as they used to. And so oftentimes when I was working on active duty, we would get the command or the spouse would say, hey, can you just check this person out? And then lo and behold, we would talk to them and get the real story. And it was, yeah, actually, I had, 2 or 3 concussions. I just never told anyone about it. And so we try to prevent that. And I think culturally in today's military, we've gotten a lot better at identifying and having individuals come forward and tell us about it. But it still is a little bit of a problem. And to your point, and with Help Heal Veterans, a lot of the effects that I've seen on the healing aspect of it, it's not just on the individual, the service member, the veteran, but it can be on the family and bringing them closer together. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about the kits that we offer, and one of the things that really can make a difference in the lives of the entire family.
Well, and great segue, Dr. Stuessi. Joe, our Captain McClain, excuse me. Let's talk about the specific programs that Help Heal Veterans offers to veterans active duty and their families to address this traumatic brain injury, PTSD, anxiety, stress, motor function even. Talk about the programs.
Yeah, so like I said, we make therapeutic crafts that are help with clinician input to help supplement or complement the treatment they may be getting under a clinician's care. So it's not in any way, shape, or form a replacement for that, but we try to make something another tool in the toolbox, either for the therapist, the clinician, the veteran, or the family member to use on their healing journey. So, for example, in the traumatic brain injury world, well, it may be that fine motor skills, or the ability to concentrate, or the ability to sequence, or for a period of time that can be helpful as a step on their healing journey. Like I like to say that when you heal from a TBI or PTSD, or you're trying to manage your pain, it's a series of small battles. Like he said, it's not like here's a silver bullet, you're better. It's going to be a lot of therapy for some folks. And this is one piece of that can help someone heal up from that. I remember I was at an Intrepid Spirit where Keith used to work here in Southern California. And there was this big hard charge of special operations Marine. And he was there with his spouse, and he was still a little fragile. Intrepid Spirit, by the way, is an awesome program in the military. 8 weeks of outpatient. That's very much a tailored set of therapies that apply over a period of time that's unique and tailored to that particular soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine. But it just gets him on that path. But what I remember, though, is just how fragile he was. And he came up to me, big guy, still a little fragile, with tears in his eyes, thanking me for one of the kits that we make, which is a wood motorcycle puzzle. And he was just saying what a big difference it made, that the fact that he never thought he could do something like that, he able to complete it, be a little bit more creative. It helped him a lot, and it helped him to be successful in the other therapy that brought forward, because he was successful in this one little tool. So we make a tool to help win these small battles, and it's pretty amazing what creativity, something so small, can do in conjunction with a good therapy from your doctors and therapists.
Yeah, and that's a great story. You talk about this big macho man, this big guy with tears in his eyes, because this really made a difference. And you think, I think a lot of people would go, no, you're not going to do crafts. Like, how does that even help? And so specifically, you provide therapeutic craft kits, or we can just say you provide craft kits, all different kinds of craft kits. But Dr. Stuessi, question for you. Why is creativity, arts, and crafts maybe a great substitute for medicine, or great in addition to medicine?
Well, I think that because it hits, certain parts of the brain, and to be honest, at the end of my career, I started getting into, I helped teach at the Intrepid Spirit that Joe was talking about. I started getting into more complementary medicine areas such as mindfulness, and I found that that type of medicine it's just, I think it's in Western medicine, it's really untapped. I mean, we're learning more and more about it. And I think it can be very, very effective. And if you take a look at, craft kits and creativity, you're using your brain to do certain things. And there have been multiple studies in the world of art therapy, and even some in the craft therapy realm, that show that, certainly certain parts of the brain almost light up when you do a craft kit or you do art therapy. And that can be very beneficial. It takes your mind off of what you're worrying about in the case of anxiety. It can have a positive impact on the cognition. Joe talked about even something as simple as many of the folks who have sustained traumatic brain injury can have difficulty following instructions. And our kits provide a range of instructions, very simplistic, all the way up to some of the kits are very, very complex. And so our occupational therapists used to use the kits simply as a way to get them to follow instructions in a regular sequence. And that sometimes then will flow over to other parts of their lives or their activities of daily living. And so I think because it does affect multiple parts of the brain, it can open up certain centers that were previously not opened up. And for me, I think getting back to, I mentioned about the kind of complementary alternative, it really is that extra thing, something you can add on to the more traditional types of therapy. And, unfortunately, as physicians, we're oftentimes, we like to name it, blame it, and then tame it with a drug. I remember that phrase from one of the complementary alternative providers I used to work with. And so getting away from that model and getting more towards, here's something that is very simple, very effective in my mind. And the stories, as Joe mentioned, we can, countless, hundreds of stories from the veterans and even active duty folks that have used our kits that just get incredible positive results from it. Clearly something's working there. And it's just a very, very good thing, I think.
We talk about TBI, which is something that I'm very concerned about, because as Keith knows, I have a son who works in the Navy, who works around explosives a lot. So it's one of the things that's really near and dear to me is to kind of help him prevent that, those type of injuries. But, one thing, the kits are also, when I talk about our kits, we do about $500,000 a year. We ship them all over the world. We ship them to active duty bases, VA medical centers. We ship them to military medical centers, all the way down to small rural health clinics. And when I talk about a VA medical center, it's used by different clinicians in different ways. So you may be like, it's in the spinal cord injury clinic. It's in the palliative care, with this kind of hospice care. It's in the mental health. It's in occupational therapy. It's in rec therapy. Every doctor, clinician, or therapist uses it in different ways. So like our kits are used for by our vets, which kind of surprised me, for like helping them manage pain, that mindfulness thing that Dr. Stuessi talked about. We hear from our folks who are suffering from substance abuse, that it's that downtime, that makes them want to reach for either that drug or that tequila or whatever that monkey on their back is. And doing a craft kit or something like that, the creative, will help that feeling start to fade. Or for the Keith that talked about before about family bonding, one of the things we hear about is when our young Marine soldiers come back from deployment, they're having a hard time reconnecting with their family. But by doing something creative together, or kits, all of a sudden they're talking, they're sharing across the kitchen table, and it helps them to kind of reestablish those bonds after being away for 6 months to a year. So what amazes me is just how something so small, such as a creative project or the craft kits that we kind of make, can make such a big difference in someone's life.
Such a big difference in so many different arenas, really and truly. And you mentioned quite a few there. And Dr. Stuessi, I love the idea that you're open to, or this Western medicine is becoming more open to mindfulness and spirituality and different types of therapy, not just, here, what did you say? Treat it, like
name it, blame it, tame it, right? So yes.
Name it, tame it, blame it. And I think it's so important. I feel I hosted a health show for 12 years. And so I got to meet a lot of doctors and do great work with doctors that treat patients with TBIs. And it was always interesting to me to just see that door open a little bit more into these therapies, into mindfulness, into spirituality, because it does all come into play. And so I think that's a fantastic way to look at it, and start being more open to how can we help you rather than just treat you with medicine. Captain McClain, you mentioned that you collaborate with community centers and VA hospitals and other healthcare organizations. And does it happen? Can you treat people at home if they have someone coming in? And then is there a insurance process to it? Are there any, challenges you face when trying to get these kits out there to help others? Because this is an important thing.
It is, but I think what you're one thing to remember is that maybe I should have mentioned is that we are a nonprofit. So we manufacture about 75% of our kits are made from a lot of made from upcycled materials. We make everything from, like you're talking about, your classic paint by numbers to wallets, to bags, to clocks, to wooden models. We have a facility here in Winchester. We can make quite a bit of stuff, which is pretty good value for the donor dollar. But we give all this away for free, and it's provided by the generosity of our donors. We don't get any government grants or anything like that. It's all small individual donors. Some of whom have been giving us for, like, my oldest donor has been giving us to over 40 years. We've been for 53. The average donor has been giving us for 18 to 20 years. So we have people who are truly committed for a long time to helping our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and now the Space Force heal from those invisible wounds of war. But we do, to answer your question, we do have a what we call a PHR program. It's a patient home rehab, and this is very big into rural health. We have a lot of older vets, Vietnam guys, maybe a few Korea guys still left, who don't either can't or unable to get to the VA. So what we'll do is that, and they can sign up on our website. There's a really short type of a sign up process, and we will send them a number of kits, either every quarter or every month, every annually. It depends upon what the funding looks like, to help them with their own journey. And this kind of helps them kind of, in a way, almost self-medicate in a healthy way until they can hopefully, and we encourage them to seek out help through their local doctor. And we'll include suicide awareness material from the VA, mindfulness stuff that Dr. Stuessi has provided us, all types of stuff to help them in their healing journey. In case they're not unable to get that care. But we do about 500,000 kits a year, and we give it away for free. And we survive by donations, like any nonprofit.
And so, do you want to mention some of those big donors that have been around for 30 years, 18 years, the big ones?
I don't have their names in front of me because they're all small individual folks. I will mention Billy, who's been around for a while.
Well, I thought it was
watching out there.
I thought it would be a manufacturer or company that would be done with some of the items they have on the shelf and their overruns, and they give those to you. But these are really individuals that are stepping up.
It is. Well, we've gotten some great support from, like, Plaid, Joanne. We're talking to Michaels right now for things like that to give us. We have a great relationship with Southwest Airlines. Then when we upcycle a lot of the airline seats, which we will use that in place of leather for making our wallets, some of the inserts. We make a great messenger bag, which I don't think I have. But anyway, I'll show you some pictures of that. You can see that. Wood kits out of lasers. So a lot of stuff we make is mostly we make ourselves. But what's great also about the industry is, for example, we can design craft kits from the ground up. So if, like, say, Joanne's has got some templates and Plaid has got maybe some paint they've got left over, and Michael's has got maybe a little bit of this. We could take all that Frankenstein stuff up together and make it something really creative, help people to creatively express themselves. Like, we have a messenger bag. Well, here's some templates to make it a little bit better, to go beyond the craft kit, which is what we find truly to be healing. Is we have instructions, you follow it, but like anything else, there's an opportunity to express yourself, and that makes it even more therapeutic when you can express real creativity.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. And again, you're working on the puzzle. How am I going to put this together? And sure, you have the notes, but I'm going to do it my way, and that takes your mind off of what you're thinking.
Exactly.
It's a process. So you get one kit, you do a little craft therapy, a little art therapy. It's not a quick fix, I would imagine. So as you're seeing the improvement in cognitive function and motor skills, Dr. Stuessi, how long is this a lifelong process? Have you seen improvement after one session of crafting?
I think in some cases you can, and especially when it comes to, I think the motor aspect of it. I think one of the coolest cases and one of the most impressive cases I saw. We have a storefront, we call them, in Chicago, that's located right next to one of the largest VAs in the country there. And I met a gentleman who had a stroke. And of course, that involves the fine motor. It was mainly in his hand and in his arm. And, the individual was seeing a therapist and had gotten to a point, was doing pretty well, but had kind of plateaued. And so their specialist had sent him over to start doing some rehab with the kids. And, he told me, he said it was absolutely amazing just after the one session. And I forget which kid he was making, but you could imagine by using his hands, doing fine motor stuff. I believe, Joe, it was a moccasin. We have these moccasin kits where you have to take the thread and with the needle and put it through. But, just by doing that, the motion of that, he felt significantly better, and he felt that his hands were working better. So, of course, right there, now you've got buy-in, and this gentleman kept coming back over and over. And so I think in that sense, you may see some results, but I really do believe that it is a repetitive type thing.
Yeah.
One of the things, if I could just comment on, that kind of brings something up for me. The program that Joe talked about, the PHR, I think is really important because there are individuals who are by themselves and they're at home and they can't get out. So I think that's really valuable. But at the majority of things that we do are at the VA centers or the storefronts that I talked about or other community centers. I was a sports medicine specialist, and so I saw a lot of injuries, and we had training centers or training rooms. And in my world, we used to call it crosstalk, right? So you get 4 or 5 injured service members, and they sit there on the table getting treatments, and they say, "Hey, what'd you do to your ankle?" "Oh, you did this," and that person would talk about it. And then the other guy hurt his knee, and pretty soon they're all talking to each other. And quite frankly, there's therapy associated with that they open up and they tell about their what's happened. The same thing happens when you get 4, 5, 10 individuals in a room. They're all doing our craft kits. To me, that is seriously powerful stuff. And so to have individuals together, and just the fact that they're talking together, they're opening up, related to mental health issues. Oftentimes they're isolated. They don't get an opportunity to do that at home. So just that in and of itself, I believe, is one of the other beneficial kind of secondary effects that occurs when you're doing these. And so when you talk about instant effects, sure, there may be some associated with it, but it's that sustained. And those are the folks who just keep coming back. And then, of course, their mental health gets better. Then a lot of their physical stuff will get better because they're using their hands and the fine motor type stuff over and over. So, again, as I like to say, it's all good. So
it's all good. I love the idea of crosstalk too, because now you're learning from, a like-minded person. You're learning from your community, and that crosstalk, the ability to have that, really is all good, as you say. Is art therapy and craft therapy better than any of the other therapies available? Or would you say, if you're doing art, maybe you'd like music, or if you're doing this, maybe you'd like fitness? Does it compare at all?
That's a great question. I don't know if I have the exact answer for that. I think that, it's like, if you're into fitness, it's like, when I used to do sports medicine, people would say, what's the best exercise to do? And it's the one that you enjoy. And I would suspect that for all these different types of, therapeutic things, with it, whether it be art therapy or music therapy or craft therapy or whatnot, it's the one that you enjoy. And I think just by exploring any one of them is going to be beneficial. And I found patients or service members when I was on active duty, we want to offer the greatest amount of things. And if they go do Tai Chi and they find out that suddenly they love it and that's the one thing they love, fantastic. They do art therapy. They never thought they'd be into art. And they say, no, that's not for me. But then we have a music therapist next door and they start saying, I've never played a guitar, but all of a sudden I pick up a guitar and my mental health has gotten, 80% better. Well, then you stick to that. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if anyone's really done a great study looking at which one is better. I think it's whatever one suits your needs and gives you the most fulfillment is clearly going to be the best one for you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think also what's kind of unique about our kids is that they're kind of self-contained. So you don't need a therapist or a music teacher. But Keith is right on. We do not push our products on everybody. We provide a tool. And we have a screwdriver. If you need a hammer, like Keith's point, pick up the hammer. Go fly fishing. Get a dog. Whatever it is that kind of helps you in that healing journey. But we do make something that I think that's accessible, that's self-contained, that you can do, that it can be almost a starter into maybe taking more steps to expressing yourself creatively, and then also to maybe heal up for whatever your problems might be.
I kind of asked this more specifically to individuals, but is there any way to measure the success of the organization, Help Heal Veterans, as you look at the amount of community centers and VA hospitals and therapists that are using the kits that you provide?
Yeah, I think there is, because basically, for one thing, our demand only goes up. So we do not aggressively advertise what we do. We do somewhat, like the VA knows parts of the military and the collision side. But I know that if we were to aggressively advertise, our demand would triple. And that's conservative. Because there's a lot of folks out there who would want to take advantage of what we're able to do. For me, as a CEO of Help Heal Veterans, my job is not about us; it's about the people that we serve and our donors. Our donors are not giving Help Heal Veterans. Our donors are trying to make an impact to that sailor, soldier, airman, Marine, Coast Guardsman, and whatnot like that. And our job is to provide the best creative tool we can so that person can help heal and make an impact in their lives. And, I think I shared with you, Jane, some of the numbers we had as far as like the percentage of an informal survey that actually Dr. Stuessi helped design about 4 or 5 years ago, where we got just some incredible numbers of like 75% who said they had had a TBI said it helped. 97% said it helped with pain management. 70% better. 90 some odd percent said it helped with their PTSD. In the high 90s also said it helped them bond with their families. So to me, that's kind of the magic there, that the proof point that is helping, because our folks say that it helps and they want more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love those numbers. I love the data, but I think I like the idea of it more, because you both have hundreds of stories on the success of veterans and military members that are using it, and even families that you could tell us. Is there any story, and you gave us a couple, but any that come to mind, either one of you, that you want to share that maybe just recent?
Yeah, I'll go first. Mm-hmm. One, and this is, I can don't get me going. I can tell stories kind of all day. But I remember my very first day on the job, and we get thank you letters from veterans. And one of the first letters I opened was, "Thanks so much for what you do. I don't think about suicide much anymore." And that was just cut to that series of small battles that doing. And it wasn't that, okay, this saved my life, but this was one of those tools that kind of helped me heal up. I remember being in a VA hospital, and I'm not sure if Dr. Stuessi was there or not, but we visited a young woman who was in palliative care. And she was in the VA. She was probably never going to leave the hospital. And she was using our birdhouse kits that she would make and create to leave in the gardens there in the hospital, because she wanted to leave a little piece of herself behind. And we were all like, obviously just crying, because it helped her in that acceptance of what she thought her future might look like, going through there. I get thank you cards from caregivers, part of, someone who's maybe undergoing a problem where they're at home a lot, be they're older or they're, or whatnot, is their caregiver. And the caregiver wrote me a note thanking me for the kits, because it gave her husband an hour and a half of something that he could do while she took a nap, took a little break, kind of a thing. And then I'll share. I keep on going. I'll share one
it's life-changing. What you do to help others is life-changing, really and truly. And just hearing it, I'm getting like goosebumps, because I know how important it is, and we don't think about it.
Yeah, I'll share one more that was a complete surprise to me, because I'm a guy, okay, obviously, but there was a female veteran who was in an abusive relationship, and she had just left, and she was in a domiciliary, I'll say that, and she was afraid to leave, and she wanted something to do to help her manage the stress because she didn't want to step out. So she wrote and asked us for some projects which we were able to send to her, and just so she could help deal with this very stressful time in her life going forward. And I promise, though, but I'll take one more. And there's this, the opioid epidemic. We have a paraplegic vet close by who does not like what the opioids do to his body. He's in chronic pain, and he'll get up in the middle of the night and do something creative, be it a craft kit. And after a while, that sense of pain will fade for a time, is what he's told us about. So I'm sorry, I'll get off my soapbox. I'll turn it over to Dr. Stuessi.
And we talked a little bit about like on the battlefield, or when you're deployed and somebody is injured and somebody loses a limb next to you and you have PTSD. And Dr. Stuessi, you talked about at the very beginning of our conversation. I feel like sometimes too, it's almost, or this person that you were just talking about, Captain McClain, it's almost like I'm too tough. I'm too tough to not take my medicine, or I'm too tough to tell you that something's happened. But when you finally get there and you receive, and you're open to receiving that help, and you feel the difference, it's just that mentality. You have to, the awareness of what you're doing is so important. And that's what I'm trying to get at. You think, oh, I'm tough, I don't have any problems, but you need help.
Yeah, and it's, a lot of these guys and some gals too, obviously, that it's breaking those barriers down. And I think that, to Joe's point, having our kits available and trying to get them out to as many folks as we can is just vitally important, because, if you don't have the tool in front of you, you can't use it, right? And so, my experience while on active duty, working at one of these intrepid spirit centers down at Camp Pendleton, our therapists had them at the ready. And again, it was one tool that they would use, but just if you give it a shot, and if the individual maybe at first, wasn't ready to use it or didn't want to potentially, but then, there are stories where people maybe a month later, they say, well, yeah, okay, maybe I'll give it a shot. And then suddenly they do it and they find some relief with it. Like Joe, I've got lots of stories too, and Joe already talked about the family unit. But again, he was a very high-ranking Marine, very tough guy. End of his career, had been through 4 or 5 deployments, and his family situation was horrible. A lot of these guys, they don't know what it's like to be at home, because their life is deployment, and they're more used to being deployed than they are. And there's a lot of stuff that goes with it, as far as like, they're adrenaline junkies, and they're used to being there. So when they get back, it's not something they're used to. And this gentleman, he had been in therapy, and they couldn't, the barriers were tough to break down, but he took one of our kids home, and he had 2 small kids, and he sat at the table. And I'm going to start crying almost, because, for the first time, he said in months, almost years, he shared that kit with his kids, and they opened up to him, and he opened up to them. And just that one experience, he came back in tears, because he said he hadn't had that shared experience in so long. And so just that one moment in time that we were able to get him to be able to share with his kids was to me truly remarkable. And that's really what it's all about. So those type of experiences and moments are incredible. And that's the thing that, that these provide. So it's really remarkable.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. The stories that you have to tell. Captain McClain, if we want to volunteer, if we want to donate, if we want to help, what do we do? What does everybody need to do to help heal veterans?
Well, I think, like you say, donate is great. Obviously, we are a small nonprofit. We get by on the generosity of individual donors. So I know we have, in the creative world, we have a lot of generous people and generous companies. So consider us as you look at making your gifts throughout to helping serve. And it's not, you're really just not trying to help heal veterans. You please help the folks that we serve. It's all about our veterans, our active duty, and their families. So please consider that. Creative community, there's some great designers out there. As I mentioned before, we manufacture anywhere from 75 to 80% of our kits. Some of used in gift and kind apply there, but we can always use help of skilled designers. We have to make kits at scale. We may get a few pieces and parts. You're not quite sure what to do with them yet, but would love to have you join our community designers, and you can learn a little bit more on our website about how to do that. Maybe help us with some designs that maybe not just one-offs. We have to make thousands of these things. So help us making things to scale. And your creativity would be very helpful, because we serve, just like any other somebody in the creative field, we serve anywhere from that 18-year-old Marine all the way up to that 70, 80, 90-year-old veteran, who's in a senior center. And all genders, urban, rural, all races, all sexuality, everything. Because a veteran is basically, in active duty, is basically part of our American demographic. So helping us make kits that can appeal, especially more to our female veterans, where that the population is growing year over year. So trying to make kits that can really be appealing to that young active duty sailor or Marine who happens to be female, to help with warrior resiliency, help them prepare for the stress of combat, would be very helpful. And finally, I think just like you say, volunteer. You can find out more about that on our website. Share your stories. You have folks out there who creativity has meant a lot to them. And part of what we try to do, especially on social media sometimes, is to share little stories about how doing something has helped you heal. Because when others can see that this tool works, they may take a stab at it. So please.
Please, it's all good. Dr. Stuessi, what does creativity mean to you?
I think creativity is it's really opening up the mind to areas that for most people have never been open before. It's exploring new facets of the brain that haven't been explored in most cases. I just think in our population specifically, I mean, I'm sure in your world, and you do podcasts and related to arts and crafts and creativity, you see this all the time. But I find it amazing that in our population, with the active duty and even the veterans, that there are creative people out there, but most of them have not been exposed to creativity itself and using the brain in different manners than they're typically used to. And so I think it gets into, as you mentioned before, the mindfulness aspect of it, the kind of almost to a spirituality point of it, the relaxation point of it. I think all those things are kind of combined when you talk about creativity, and certainly the benefits of it, but and the relaxation, of course, to it. Yeah, it's just, I've never been asked that question before, so that's a great question. But it really is. It's just again, I think kind of using things in a different manner and putting things together in a different way than kind of we typically think about, and that we typically do, quite frankly. So yeah.
I always tell people, and certainly not veterans and people that have risked their lives for my freedom, or to protect me, but I tell others just to inspire them to make something, because I feel like it lowers your stress and it puts you in flow. But I say, give me an hour and make something, and you'll just feel this joy and this sense of satisfaction that you made it yourself. And it's like no other feeling in the world. Yep. And after this conversation with you guys, it's like, take that feeling and put it on, or give it to somebody who needs help, who wants that feeling, who needs that joy and that satisfaction.
Yep.
And that fills me up. It really does. Where can we find more information? Where can we look up the stats? Where do we go? Websites, socials, all that good stuff.
All that good stuff is basically www.healvets.org. HEALVETS.org. You can always find links there as far as Instagram. We're active on YouTube, Facebook, all the stuff there. And for Instagram, follow us there and share your stories there too.
Yeah, share your stories. I mean, it's really inspiring to see just how the craft therapy is making a difference in the lives of our veterans and active duty military members, and also their families. And I want everyone to remember, creativity isn't just about making something beautiful. It can be about healing, connecting, and giving back that's what we're talking about today. And if you're inspired at all by today's episode, consider how you can use your creativity and your time and your talents to make a positive impact on the community around you. HealVets.org. I'll say it again, HealVets.org. Go there, help out, donate, do what you can do. Say thank you. It is all good. Captain Joe McClain and Dr. Keith Stuessi, thank you so much for joining us on Creative Living.
Thank you, Jane, so much.
Thank you, Jane.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, and download the Creative Living Podcast with Jane Klaus.
Live better creatively. For more inspiration, visit janeclaus.com. Thank you for listening.